Namaste, Dhanava Pranam. By the grace and instruction of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 27, Text 21. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Animita Nimittena Swadharmena Malatmana Tivraya Mai Bhaktya Cha Shruta Sambritaya Chiram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. By thus executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction, and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. Purport. Sridhar Swami comments in this connection that by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Conditional life begins only after one is infected by the modes of material nature. If someone is in contact with the police department, that does not mean he is a criminal. As long as one does not commit criminal acts, even though there is a police department, he is not punished. Similarly, the liberated soul is not affected, although he is in the material nature. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is supposed to be in association with material nature when he descends, but he is not affected. One has to act in such a way that in spite of being in the material nature, he is not affected by contamination. Although the lotus flower is in association with water, it does not mix with the water. That is how one has to live, as described here by the Personality of Godhead Kapila-dev. Animita nimittena svadharmena malatmana. One can be liberated from all adverse circumstances simply by seriously engaging in devotional service. How this devotional service develops and becomes mature is explained here. In the beginning, one has to perform his prescribed duties with a clean mind. Clean consciousness means Krishna consciousness. One has to perform his prescribed duties in Krishna consciousness. There is no necessity of changing one's prescribed duties. One simply has to act in Krishna consciousness. In discharging Krishna conscious duties, one should determine whether, by his professional or occupational duties, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is satisfied. In another place in the Bhagavatam, it is said, Svanustitasya dharmasya samsiddhir hari toshanam. Everyone has some prescribed duties to perform, but the perfection of such duties will be reached only if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is satisfied by such actions. For example, Arjuna's prescribed duty was to fight, and the perfection of his fighting was tested by the satisfaction of Krishna. Krishna wanted him to fight, and when he fought for the satisfaction of the Lord, that was the perfection of his professional devotional duty. On the other hand, when contrary to the wish of Krishna, he was not willing to fight, that was imperfect. If one wants to perfect his life, he should discharge his prescribed duties for the satisfaction of Krishna. One must act in Krishna consciousness, for such action will never produce any reaction. Animita nimattena. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Yagyartat karma no nyatra. All activities should be performed simply for yagya, or the satisfaction of Vishnu. Anything done otherwise without the satisfaction of Vishnu, or yagya, produces bondage. So here it is prescribed by Kapila Muni that one can transcend material engagement by acting in Krishna consciousness, which means seriously engaging in devotional service. This serious devotional service can develop by hearing for long periods of time. Chanting and hearing is the beginning of the process of devotional service. One should associate with devotees and hear from them about the Lord's transcendental appearance, activities, disappearance, instructions, etc. There are two kinds of shruti, or scripture. One is spoken by the Lord, and the other is spoken about the Lord and his devotees. Bhagavad Gita is the former, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the latter. One must hear these scriptures repeatedly from reliable sources in order to become fixed in serious devotional service. Through engagement in such devotional service, one becomes freed from the contamination of Maya. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead cleanses the heart of all contamination caused by the influence of the three modes of material nature. By continuous, regular hearing, the effects of the contamination of lust and greed, or to enjoy or lord it over material nature, diminish. And when lust and greed diminish, one then becomes situated in the mode of goodness. This is the stage of Brahman realization or spiritual realization. In this way, one becomes fixed on the transcendental platform. Remaining fixed on the transcendental platform is liberation from material entanglement. Text 22. Jnanena drishta tatvena vairagyena baliyasa tapo yuktena yugena tivranatma samadhina. This devotional service has to be performed strongly in perfect knowledge and with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. Purport. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. It is specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge by visualizing the absolute truth. We can understand about the absolute truth by evolving transcendental knowledge, and the result of such transcendental knowledge will be manifested by renunciation. That renunciation is not temporary or artificial, but is very strong. It is said that development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment, or vairagya. If one does not separate himself from material enjoyment, it is to be understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. Renunciation in Krishna consciousness is so strong that it cannot be deviated by any attractive illusion. One has to perform devotional service in full tapasya, austerity. One should fast on the 2 Ekadasi days, which fall on the 11th day of the waxing and waning moon, and on the birthdays of Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are many such fasting days. Yogena means by controlling the senses and mind. Yoga Indriya Samyama. Yogena implies that one is seriously absorbed in the self and is able, by development of knowledge, to understand his constitutional position in relationship with the superself. In this way, one becomes fixed in devotional service, and his faith cannot be shaken by any material allurement. Text 23. Prakriti purushasyeha dayamanatvaharnisham tiro bhavitri shanakar agner yonir ivarani. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by a process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Purport. Fire is conserved in wooden sticks, and when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks, which are the cause of the fire, are also consumed by the fire, if it is properly dealt with. Similarly, the living entity's conditional life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over material nature, and due to his envy of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his main diseases are that he wants to be one with the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become the Lord of material nature. The karmis try to utilize the resources of material nature and thus become its Lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the jnanis, the salvationists, who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or merge into the impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to the material contamination. Material contamination can be consumed by devotional service, because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service and Krishna consciousness. A devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working. But the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, or devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, but when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since a devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he is, his activities may thus appear to be like those of a mental speculator. But actually, he is trying to understand the spiritual nature and transcendental activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not, because this activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 24. Bhukta bhoga parityakta drishta dosa cha nityasa nishbharasya shubham date sve mahimni stitasya cha. By discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. Purport. Because the living entity is not actually the enjoyer of the material resources, his attempt to lord it over material nature is, at the ultimate issue, frustrated. As a result of frustration, he desires more power than the ordinary living entity, and thus wants to merge into the existence of a supreme enjoyer. In this way, he develops a plan for greater enjoyment. When one is actually situated in devotional service, that is his independent position. Less intelligent men cannot understand the position of the eternal servant of the Lord. Because the word servant is used, they become confused. They cannot understand that this servitude is not the servitude of this material world. To be the servant of the Lord is the greatest position. If one can understand this and can thus revive one's original nature of eternal servitorship of the Lord, one stands fully independent. A living entity's independence is lost by material contact. In the spiritual field, he has full independence, and therefore there is no question of becoming dependent upon the three modes of material nature. This position is attained by a devotee, and therefore he gives up the tendency for material enjoyment after seeing his faultiness. The difference between a devotee and an impersonalist is that an impersonalist tries to become one with the Supreme so that he can enjoy without impediment, whereas a devotee gives up the entire mentality of enjoying and engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is his constitutional, glorified position. At that time, he is Ishvar, fully independent. The real Ishvara, or Ishvara Parama, is Supreme Ishvara, or the Supreme Independent, which is Krishna. The living entity is Ishvara only when engaged in service of him. In other words, transcendental pleasure derived from loving service to the Lord is actual independence. Text 25. Yatahya pratibudhasya prasvapo bhavan artabrit sa eva pratibudhasya navai mohaya kalpate. In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Purport. In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which cause disturbance or anxiety. But upon awakening, although he remembers what happened in the dream, he is not disturbed. Similarly, the position of self-realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied, and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. In contaminated consciousness, one sees everything to be for his own enjoyment. But in pure Krishna consciousness, he sees that everything exists for the enjoyment of the Supreme Enjoyer. That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness. The state of contaminated consciousness is compared to dream consciousness, and Krishna consciousness is compared to the awakened stage of life. Actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. One who can understand that Krishna is the proprietor of all three worlds and that he is the friend of everyone is peaceful and independent. As long as conditioned souls don't have this knowledge, they want to be the enjoyer of everything. They want to become a humanitarian or philanthropist and open hospitals and schools for fellow human beings. This is all illusion, for one cannot benefit anyone by such material activities. If one wishes to benefit his fellow brother, he must awaken his dormant Krishna consciousness. The Krishna conscious position is that of pratibuddha, which means pure consciousness. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 26 on Friday. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Our glories to the assembled devotees, our glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai.
Jai.
Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nishangapali Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Puri Dham Ki Jai, Baladev Subhadra Jagannath Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Giri Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sham Kund Radha Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagi Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagi Ki Jai. Princeton Vedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Ki Jai. Jai Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari
Hari Bol.
Jai Shrimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai.
Jai Gurudev. Sripad Krishna Keshav Prabhu Ji Ki Jai.